I'm Lauren Whiteurst. I'm a certified personal trainer and certified nutrition coach.
Hi, I'm Sunny Lippincott. I'm a certified professional life coach and a certified brain health professional.
We also have Angela Salyers, who is a licensed professional counselor, and the three of us together make up
Whole Life Vitality.
We teach whole life vitality of the mind, body, and soul, bringing the physical, emotional, and spiritual together for whole life wellness. Welcome back, friends. We are here today with a good friend of mine, Miss Trish Cook. We reconnected recently after a bit of a hiatus in our friendship. I mean, we met locally and then you moved away, and we kind of lost touch for a minute and then reconnected. But as we were reconnecting, we started talking about a subject that has impacted us both greatly, and that is grief.
Yeah.
Before we really dig into grief, Trish, could you just tell us a little bit about you?
I am from Utah. My husband and I are both from Utah. We're born and raised there. The experience that you would probably expect in Utah. And then we moved out south for my husband's medical education. We moved from Alabama, different parts of Alabama, which is where we met. And then we moved to Mississippi, and now we're living in Tennessee, and we're planning to stick around here for a long time. But Lauren got caught up in my friendships where I get to stay for a few years and then I hop out. But I've always really appreciated people like her who just are willing to make those friendships with people who they know are temporary, which is kind of a theme of, I guess, today as well. The podcast is just being that friend to someone who you know is temporary, or being a friend when it's not the most comfortable thing. Grief is something that it's not comfortable to be around. And then you become familiar with it and that gets less uncomfortable, but it's always going to be uncomfortable. It's not a fun thing to feel. So
in this process of moving from place to place and going through
yes,
residency, then you've met
yes,
a lot of people.
yes, I've met a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances.
And you have such a huge heart. I feel like when you meet someone, you very quickly get to know them. You're very empathetic.
Yeah.
You really want to dive deep. There's no small talk with Trish. We just dive right in, and we're talking about
what is small talk even?
Right.
I don't know. What the weather? I'll talk about the weather as it pertains to how we're experiencing life, but
right.
But I'm not really a small talk person.
So when you meet people, you go deep really quickly. And
yes,
in doing that, you get to know people and kind of share a space in your heart that is just so passionate. Like you love deeply.
yes.
And
yes.
that means that you feel loss also very deeply. And in the course of knowing so many people, you've had to walk alongside people who are grieving and or deal with grief yourself in a very profound way. And
Yes.
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today, because your firsthand experience with grief, I feel like there's a lot that you can share about that. So for you personally, can we talk about your personal history with grief first before we dig into those friends of yours?
You have me accurate, by the way. That is me. You just have me straight. Yes, you have it down. I definitely love deeply, and I've said a lot of hellos and unfortunately a lot of goodbyes, not just the temporary ones like with me and you from afar, social media, yay, but permanent goodbyes. And those are rough.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't think of them as full on goodbyes, but it just kind of depends on where you land in belief. But yeah, I have had my own experiences that, when you're growing up and you lose a grandparent, it was a lot of that kind of stuff. So my first introductions to death were pets and grandparents, just like every other normal kid.
How were you taught to experience it, or were you encouraged to feel those feelings as a child when you first experienced loss?
Not really. Well, yes, I give a lot of credit to my parents for like really creating that safe place for us to have our feelings, and especially when it came to grief over loss. It wasn't discouraged to feel it, but we did get the not specifically from our parents, but we did get like the spiritually bypassing statements and the
Like
things that
what?
people don't.
Can you be specific about what that would be?
Yeah, so spiritually bypassing is oftentimes when we insert our own beliefs into someone else's situation and then expect them to feel relief or comfort from it.
Like a
And
Band-Aid.
yeah. And it's oftentimes received as like the thing that people say when they don't want to put in energy towards actually reaching out. So it's usually like, when people offer prayers, there's nothing wrong with offering prayers. Some people really, really receive that and feel comfort in knowing that people are praying for them, but take it further, and don't just stop there. So that's a common one. People hear that all the time, like take it further. But but also I just feel like people get off track in what they're trying to accomplish with people. Like they think that teaching them about their belief system or about what's brought them comfort is going to fix it, and grief can't be fixed. It's not going to be fixed. And rarely, especially with new fresh grief, the spiritually bypassing statements like they're in a better place. I know that people know that they are in a place where they don't have to feel the horrible pain that they themselves are feeling right now. Like they're relieved that their loved one no longer is struggling through chemotherapy or through whatever's going on for them, but it doesn't fix it. You have to come to your own comprehension of that concept. You can't be told that. And same thing with, that it will get easier with time. It doesn't get easier with time. It doesn't get easier with time. We grow around it.
So for you started out, grandparents or pets, but then as you got older, then I think like most of us, you experienced loss in a much more profound way. And
thank you for bringing me in, because I get on my rabbit trails.
And I know that I was there for part of that, at least a couple of the big ones that I saw. And I also feel very deeply. And so I'm feeling for you, even as we bring this back up again. But the loss of your third child was, I know pregnancy has always been really hard for you. And it's been a journey in and of itself, just getting pregnant and then maintaining a pregnancy. But the loss of your third child was just such a profound loss, and watching you grieve through that process was so sad and so beautiful in how you processed through that. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's funny because you were actually there for like pregnancy announcements, and like these were the big moments. And our babies come through IVF, and so having that baby happen the way it did just felt so meant to be. So then to have it kind of come ripped away from us, he was small but beautiful and perfect, and the moment we lost him was extremely vulnerable and sacred and horrible and all the things. I don't look back on, for a time I looked back on it and I felt special feelings around the loss itself and the experience, having like giving birth to this baby. But like I feel now, with some time and distance between myself and my loss, I do think fondly of those experiences.
Yeah, like anything else, we can take those experiences as things that happen to us or things that happen for us, and not to diminish loss in any way, but to kind of pull from it what we feel like we can. I lost my sister a couple of years ago, and you kind of were around for that as well. And
not as much as I would like to say I was.
Wow.
I wasn't sure how to handle grief, and
I think that's where most people wind up, because I lost a friend not long before I lost my sister, and I have some shame around that time as my friend was going through her end stages of cancer, and some shame because I feel like I didn't know how to process my grief and also be there for her. And so I pulled away. That's, I think, such a common thing for people, because we're all sad. She was my good friend, and we had been friends for a long time. And then to have this horrible thing happen for her, I didn't know how to process it. And I didn't know how to process my grief and also help her along the space of processing hers. And so I think that's one of the things that I really wanted to come back to today, is to kind of give people the space to know how to exist in that space. I think that honestly, I was terrified of saying and doing all the wrong things and making things worse for her. I'm like, you're miserable anyway. I don't want to come in here and make things worse for you. But you recently, as we've reconnected, you've shared with me how God, or whatever your greater power is, keeps putting these people in your path that are kind of at their end stages of life, and you're just kind of being there with them. And as you told me about it, it blew my mind, because you did what I couldn't do. You're doing what I couldn't do, what I felt like I wasn't emotionally able to do at the time. And I just have so much respect for that. And I would love to hear about what you're doing with these people in your life and how you're being there for them, because I think that it will, one, help me selfishly, and to help our listeners to really understand how they can be there for people who might be grieving in their lives.
Yeah, I would love to talk about it. And I also, is that friend of yours that's been battling? Well, I have a friend that hates when we use war terms in regards to chemo. And
no, but that's
not everyone feels that way, but
okay.
she definitely does. And she has quite the following, actually. She's on TikTok, and I'll talk about her a little bit, but she's the one that you've been hearing me talk about. And it's hard watching and being in this space where it kind of goes back to that sensation that or feeling that I was kind of saying, where I appreciate you and I appreciate people that take on friends even when they know they're temporary. I have a great appreciation for that for myself, just because we've moved every 2 to 3 years, and you can't just go 8 years without a support system across the country from your family.
Miserable.
Yeah. And so the people that realize that and are willing to take you in as family, basically, is what y'all did. I feel like when that happens, with Chris, I took her on as a friend, knowing her diagnosis, knowing her prognosis. There's something about that makes it easier for me to show up for her than watching someone that I've known healthy die.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said easier. I don't know if that's the right word, but like there's something about that just makes it, I'm going into it knowing I'm going to say goodbye very soon.
Yeah, you had an expectation from the beginning, knowing that it was going to be a short-term situation.
And when you have someone going through cancer, you have some warning, typically you have some warning. And so with her, we've had 6 years. She's like, she's toughed out 6 years. I don't know how she's done this, but she has. And I, like, seriously, if you want to go follow her, I don't remember her TikTok name at the
We'll make sure that we link it in the podcast so that people can follow her if they want to.
She talks about how to show up for people for like her. And she
That's
has
so needed. That's just
she's
such a
got a
beautiful thing.
stretched, yeah, she's got like a reach with people, and a lot of people with cancer, a lot of people with terminal diagnosis are like commenting, and they're getting a lot of validation and from her. And so for sure follow her if you're in that situation, especially.
Yeah.
But her and I both have a little bit of social anxiety, and I don't ever want to show up like and just claim her emotional energy.
Sure.
And so like I try to ask like consent at all times. And I know that, you know, people probably think that using words like that, like my husband would be like, oh, consent. But like I try to ask people, because she has a very limited amount of energy and time. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to insert myself into her life when she has children. She has young children.
That's just
And
healthy boundaries, girl. Good
yeah,
job.
just ask for consent, right?
That's right.
Then that's the thing too, is there are going to be times where you need to not ask, because they'll never tell you.
Yeah.
They'll never tell you that they need something. They'll never tell you what they need. And so sometimes you do have to insert yourself, but make sure you're doing it for their benefit and not yours, like not just to make you feel better.
Right.
Make sure you're doing it to help in a way that actually helps them. With Chris, I feel like I've shown up a couple of times. Like I'll hold back, you know, because my social anxiety and her social anxiety just mixes together. We both know it, okay? And then it causes inaction, because neither one of us is like forward enough, or like, you know, to actually just be like, I'm coming. I don't care how you feel about it, you know?
Right.
And so, well, I mean, I do care about how you feel, but you know what I'm saying? So I just show up, and she hasn't yet told me that it was the wrong call. And I have asked her, I follow it up with like, how, you know, how are you feeling? How is that for you?
Yeah.
Is it okay when I just show up? You know, and it's okay to ask. And it's also okay if they say, hey, that was really sweet and it was needed today. I'm not sure that it's an everyday thing, but I really appreciated that, you know. Or even if they are negative about it, then you know that's not the way to show up for them.
Yeah.
Find a different way. So I don't know, you just kind of have to be brave. Be willing to look at your relationship as something that you're willing to experiment with a little bit, and just try. Just try. Don't say the cliche things that come up in your head.
Dr. Caroline
Yes.
gave us a list of what not to say. I love her. I follow her on social media. Highly recommend. But
What's her name again?
Dr. Caroline Leaf.
Leaf. I've heard of her.
And I'll make sure that we also link that in this podcast so that people can see. But she gave us a list of things, what to say and what not to say. And this is the list of what not to say. And I really appreciated this, because when I was processing that fresh grief of my sister passing, I feel like there's not really anything that anyone could say that was going to make me feel better. Yeah. But a lot of the things that I heard, I thought, this is not necessary. Why are you even saying this? So here's one of them. At least he's in a better place. His suffering is over. You'll be okay after a while. I understand how you feel. You shouldn't feel that way. That's always great. Let's just completely invalidate people's feelings.
Yeah, that's good.
There is a reason for everything. God's in charge. Okay, whether it's true or not, I'm just saying I don't want to hear it.
This is spiritually bypassing.
Yes,
this is what spiritually.
Yeah. Blank was such a good person. God wanted blank to be with him. You know, insert name here in the blank. You have to be strong for your spouse, children, mother, etc. I was actually told within moments of receiving the news, that I had to be strong for my family within moments of receiving the news, and I very quickly hung up on that person, because I was not in a place to be strong for anybody at the moment.
No, that person was not thinking straight. That was no.
Stay busy. Don't think about it, or just give it time. Time heals. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from really dealing with that grief firsthand is that grief is selfish, and that's okay. Yes. And it's an okay time to be selfish. As I was processing the loss of my sister, I kept thinking, I know she's happier. She spent so much of her life sad and hurting and depressed. She was a product of abuse on multiple fronts. She had lost children. She had dealt with so much grief. and mental health stuff and physical health stuff. And I know that wherever she is in this moment, she is happier. She probably feels better. She has moved on with whatever she needs to move on with. I feel very strongly that that is the case. However, selfishly, I'm angry. I'm angry she's gone. I'm angry about the life situation that she had to deal with. And I know that anger is a secondary emotion. And so I realized that underneath it all, I'm actually just really sad because she's not
No,
here.
the grief comes out how it comes out. You can't really control it. You just gotta let it.
But I felt like I know that this is selfish of me because I know that all I'm doing in this moment is thinking about me and what I want in her being here. But I think in the processing of that grief, it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to say, I'm sad. It's okay to take the time to just be in that space and let yourself feel those big emotions.
Yeah. Well, because ultimately, here is the deal: is grief the reason why it is the most overpowering thing that I myself and have ever experienced and I've ever seen anyone experience is because of love. Whenever I think about my babies, whenever I think about the people I've lost, the reason it hurts so much is because I love them so much. So the
Mhm.
grief is just like, to me, it is the evidence of the permanent impactful change that person left in my life and my heart. It represents the relationship I still believe we have, because while they are gone and their heartbeat is stopped and all that, my love and my relationship and my grief lives on very alive inside of me. And so, and to bond with other people that understand that understand that despite the death, despite the loss, they still feel something very alive in them, which is the love they have for that person. And there's other kinds of grief. There's regret. There's sometimes is this feeling of longing for what the relationship could have been.
Right.
There's that can be involved as well. But in terms of speaking about like relationships that we hold fond, it to me, talking with people who have experienced loss and have grief, I connect with that because it's so honest. Like,
Yeah.
grief makes you so honest
Just so
and
vulnerable.
very, like, just it cracks you wide open.
Yep. You
And
can't hide it.
and no, and it's painful. Like,
Yeah.
it's painfully vulnerable. But something that I've noticed, and I kind of collected some thoughts from other people, and I'll go into that in a minute, but when I collected these thoughts, I noticed a couple of things in common, but one thing in common was they were so honest. Every
Mhm.
single one of them, they didn't sugarcoat it. They didn't say any spiritually bypassing stuff. They said the things that people are afraid to say out loud when they're asked how they're doing,
Wow.
because they knew that I was really asking. Like, I'm really asking. And so be that person that when you ask, the other person knows you're really asking. You're not going to
Mhm.
get uncomfortable when they respond. And if you do get uncomfortable, you at least can say, I have no idea what to say because your profound loss scares me,
Yeah.
because I never want to go through that, but I know I will. So,
Mhm.
like, I'm going to stay here with you, and I'm going to, like, not just learn from you for my own benefit later, but I this is something everyone goes through. This is a normal part of life. I've said recently a few times, we're born to die. That sounds really pessimistic, but like,
But
we
that's the
all,
cycle of life.
yeah,
We're born, we live, and we pass on to whatever is
yes,
next. That's just the way it was designed.
exactly. And it was interesting because I was watching the show, and I think it's called like 6 Feet Under or something like that.
Oh, I
And
haven't
it
seen that, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it was kind of random, which in the end doesn't feel so random now. Okay, so it's just basically about this family who is like a funeral home out of their basement, and the dad, the main he gets in like a horrific accident, and the show is kind of a mix of like humor and realness. It's about a mortician family. He gets in a wreck, he dies, and then the family's response to his death. It's really, really honest and kind of funny how honest it is. Maybe that's just me coping, but but
And that's
they there's
that is a form of coping, using
yes,
humor. I mean, sometimes
absolutely.
in the grief process, we need to mask. And
Yeah.
because it hurts so much and you feel it so deeply and so profoundly that sometimes we just need to mask with laughter. So
Yes.
we laugh at the pain, or we joke through the pain because it's easier.
Exactly.
And then when we have space to actually feel that pain more deeply, then we feel
Yeah.
it, because the only way through it is through it.
I'm in that spot right now where I am legitimately dissociating around something, so I'm talking around it at the moment, but I'll share it in a few minutes. The show is, he talks about like they're at their dad's funeral, okay? Their mom goes up to see her husband for the last time, and she starts sobbing. And there's some backstory that's funny. You'll have to watch it. It's the first episode in the first season. But she gets ushered away by the, one of the sons that's more traditional. And the one that's less traditional, the son that is less traditional, says to the sister, "Why did we rush them away like that?" And she's like, "I
Yeah.
guess that their emotions, their grief makes people uncomfortable."
Yeah.
And he said, "It's not about them. It's
Yeah.
about us. It's about the people who are grieving so entirely. These people that show up should be around, like, picking us up off the floor. Like, they shouldn't be, or on the floor with us. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
ushering us away as we look at our, like, deceased family member." And so he talks about on his travels, there's some islanders, and he witnesses them have a family member returned in a like pine box, to the island, and returned to the, like, on the sand from a boat. And their family and tribe, or they are all there and waiting for their loved one's body, and on the sand, and they're all dressed in black, and the second the box hits the sand, they throw their bodies over it wailing.
Yeah.
And in the show, it was really impactful, and he said, back when I saw it, it freaked me out. Like, it freaked me out to see that.
Because that
But
level of
yeah,
openness and vulnerability can be
yeah, that
very scary
pain.
for people.
They're showing that pain, like, grief is honest, and if we
Yeah.
are honest about it, if we get permission to be honest about it and let it out of our bodies like that,
Yeah.
how much better off would we be? So he talks about like how it freaked him out at the time, but now that he's sitting in his father's funeral watching his mom get ushered away while she cries, he says that makes the most sense to me right now than anything I've ever experienced or witnessed. And I cried when I watched that, and of course it was like right after you and I talked about doing, this. But what happened later in the show was when she was at the actual graveside, and he walks away and he picks up a handful of dirt, and everyone watches him uncomfortable because no one wants to see the dirt
Yeah.
like put on the casket because they've gotten so
it
used to
feels
these
final.
formalities.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wanted to literally do something like that, like a more literal symbolic thing that made more sense to him than what everyone expected from him.
Yeah.
And so he does this, and there's kind of a fallout to it. And then his mom, who had been holding it together for like everyone there, she says, "Wait," and she does the same thing. And she ends up picking up multiple handfuls of dirt and throwing them at the casket. And he puts it, like, she is moaning as she does, like screaming. And he puts his hand instinctually on her back to support her. And the first thing I thought of was childbirth. Like, it looked like she was like in labor, and that he was putting his back on her to support her. And like the instinctual screams that came out of her as she leaned over this casket in grief and love was strangely similar, like the birth, the labor, that process was strangely similar feeling as what she was going through. And so I just couldn't help
Beautiful.
but to make that parallel, that because I have been saying lately, "You're born to die," and I'm like, oh, there it is, right there, right in front of me on the show.
It's it's profound and really speaks to that whole circle of life. I know that you have some stories that you want to share, and I really want to get into that with you. We have reached our time limit for today, so we'll come back again for part 2 so we can hear the rest of what you have to share with us. So until then, we will have links for everything we've talked about today and Trisha's social media profiles as well, so that you can follow her and kind of hear more about her journey. And if you are dealing with grief and you would like to reach out or have someone to talk to, please do. This is not something that you need to process alone. Thank you for being here with us today, and we'll see you for part 2.
Of course.
Bye, friends.